Hi, my name is Christoph. I'm the lead developer of Fusio, an open source API management platform. In this video, I will provide a first introduction to Fusio. Before we dive directly into the backend, let's take a short high-level look at Fusio. Fusio is a tool that sits between your internal infrastructure and the outside world. It helps to make your business logic accessible through an API or agent. In this introduction, we want to create three API endpoints. An endpoint which proxies a request to a remote API, an endpoint which selects data from a database table, and finally an endpoint which uses custom worker logic. Then we will take a look at the automatically generated SDK and the developer portal which helps to onboard third-party developers. Now let's dive into the backend to see how Fusio works. We start with a complete fresh Fusio installation without any pre-configuration, so that you can easily repeat every step of this demo. At first, we create an agent connection to a remote LLM, which allows us to use several internal agents to configure our API. We use a local Ollama agent, but it's also possible to connect to other providers like ChatGPT or Gemini. Now we create a new action which proxies the request to a remote API. Therefore, we use the HTTP processor action. We can also directly execute this action to see the response. Then we create a schema which describes the JSON payload of our action response. While this is optional, it helps Fusio to automatically generate an open API specification or client SDK. Therefore, we can simply copy the JSON response and use the schema agent to create a fitting schema. The agent shows us a preview, and we can also directly create the schema. The schema is then available in the global schema store so that we can use it for every operation. Finally, we create an operation which exposes our action as API endpoint. We have now built our first API endpoint with Fusio, which proxies an HTTP request to a remote API. Next, I want to show how we can expose data from a database table. For this, we need to create a table. We use the database agent to create a simple to-do table. We can see a preview of the table structure, and we can select the target connection where the table gets created. For testing, we also use a seed agent to generate some sample to-do entries. The agent shows us also a preview of the generated seed data, and we can also directly insert this data into the table. Now we use the SQL select all action to output the data from our table. We also create a schema which describes the JSON payload. Also, we create an operation which exposes our action as API endpoint. We have now built an API endpoint which returns data from a table. The action supports also common paging and filter parameters. At last, we create a worker action which can be used to build complete custom action logic. For this, we use the action agent to generate our custom business logic. In this case, we want to select a random to-do entry from our table. The agent shows us a preview of the generated code, and we can also directly execute the action. We can then also use this payload to create a schema for this action. Finally, we also create an operation which exposes our action as API endpoint. We have now created a small API with 3 endpoints, which is ready for production usage. In the process, we could see how you can work together with agents to create powerful APIs. Next, I like to show the client SDK, which Fusio can automatically generate for you. For this, we switch to the SDK panel and generate the TypeScript client SDK. Based on the schema, Fusio can generate a complete type-safe SDK. Let's switch to VS Code to take a look at the generated code. As dependency, we only need to include the SDK gen client. In this case, I have also added a TSX to run the demo code. Through the client, we can access every operation which we have built at Fusio. All return types are complete type-safe, which makes it easy to use the API. Finally, we take a short look at the developer portal which Fusio provides. With the developer portal, you can quickly onboard external developers for your API. A developer can inspect your API specification to see all available endpoints and schemas. It provides a registration system, and users can log in to create apps and access tokens to integrate your API. Internally, the developer portal only works with the Fusio API, so it is also possible to integrate this into an existing app. This brings us to the end of our demo. I hope you're also excited about Fusio and our vision. Like WordPress has enabled everybody to write content on the web, we want with Fusio to enable everybody to build great APIs and agents. Fusio follows the open source spirit and is self-hosted, so that you stay in complete control of your data. If you like our project, feel free to follow us on GitHub.